The ocean doesn't warn you. One moment the horizon is empty, grey water meeting grey sky, nothing moving except the restless pull of the Atlantic swell. Then the fog shifts, just slightly, and something is there, a shape in the mist, long and dark, cutting toward you without sound, without colour, without mercy. The black flag climbs the mast before you can even shout a warning. And then the world explodes. Cannons tear through your hull below the waterline. The sound isn't a bang, it's a physical force. A wall of pressure that throws men off their feet, that shatters timber like bone, that fills the air with splinters moving faster than arrows. Your ship is on fire. Men are in the water. The screaming doesn't sound human anymore, and then they board you. They come over the rail like something between soldiers and madmen. Cutlasses, pistols, bare hands, fury without uniform, without flag, without king. They take everything. Your cargo, your compass, your food, sometimes your ship itself. And when it's over, when the smoke drifts away across the open sea, historians estimate that somewhere between 500 and 2,400 pirates operated in the Atlantic and Caribbean alone during the early 18th century, and every single one of them made a choice to be here. Who were these men? Why did the entire world fear them? What could be so terrible about the lives they left behind that a floating hell, disease, starvation, cannon fire, and the near certainty of a hanging seemed like the better option? That is the story we're about to tell you, and it is far stranger, far darker, and far more human than any legend you have ever heard. Chapter 1. The World They Escaped. To understand the pirate ship, you first have to understand what waited for a poor man at sea in the early 18th century. According to surviving naval records, a common sailor aboard a Royal Navy warship or a merchant vessel earned between 18 shillings and £1 per month, barely enough to survive on land, and on a ship that money meant almost nothing. You couldn't spend it, you couldn't save it, you couldn't leave. Maritime historians have documented that merchant captains during the golden age of piracy, roughly 1680 to 1730, held power so absolute it was effectively indistinguishable from ownership. If a captain decided you deserved flogging, you were flogged. No trial, no appeal, no witness that mattered. The Royal Navy operated under the same brutal arithmetic. Men were pressed into service, kidnapped essentially, dragged from taverns and dock streets and deposited aboard warships where they would remain, sometimes for years, with no legal mechanism to leave. Historian Marcus Rediker, in his landmark work on Atlantic maritime culture, documented the reality in meticulous detail. Sailors on naval and merchant ships were fed rotting salt pork and weevil-riddled biscuit. They slept in hammocks so tightly packed, 14 inches per man, per Royal Navy regulation, that the man on either side of you was close enough to breathe on your face. They died of scurvy, which dissolved their gums and blackened their limbs and killed them slowly over weeks. According to historian Stephen Bown, scurvy alone killed more sailors than storms, shipwrecks, and naval combat combined throughout the age of sail, and that was the legitimate option. Now imagine someone comes to you and says, there is another way. Chapter 2, The Choice. It usually started with a capture. A pirate crew intercepts a merchant vessel. They board. They take the cargo, and then, and this is the part the history books rarely linger on, they offer the crew a choice. Some researchers argue it was even common for captured sailors to be asked quietly, almost casually, whether they'd like to stay. According to accounts preserved in Captain Charles Johnson's A General History of the Pirates, published in 1724, the single most important primary source on Golden Age piracy, many men didn't need to be asked twice. Some jumped ship the moment the opportunity appeared, not because they were criminals, not because they were violent, but because they had just watched a pirate ship operate for 20 minutes and seen something extraordinary. The captain didn't beat them. Let that sentence land. The captain didn't beat them. On a pirate ship, against every instinct of the world they came from, authority was negotiable. Captains were elected. Not appointed, not inherited, not purchased. Voted in by the crew and voted out if they failed. This wasn't mythology. This was structural. Written into formal documents called Articles of Agreement, essentially constitutional contracts that every man signed before the voyage began. The most famous surviving example belongs to Bartholomew Roberts, the Welsh sailor who became the most successful pirate in recorded history, plundering over 400 ships across the Atlantic and African coast between 1719 and 1722. His articles, preserved in Johnson's General History, specified everything. Every man got a vote in major decisions. Every man got an equal share of provisions. Every man was entitled to medical compensation if wounded in battle, a specific financial payment determined by which limb was lost. The loss of a right arm earned 600 pieces of 8, a left arm 500, an eye 100. Maritime archives provide no equivalent document from any Royal Navy vessel of the same era. This was why men chose the black flag, not because they loved violence, because they loved, for what may have been the first time in their lives, the concept of having a vote, but the documents didn't tell you about everything else that waited on board. Chapter 3. The ship itself. You smell it before you see it, even anchored in a harbor, even still. A wooden ship of the early 18th century announces itself through the nose first. The bilge, the lowest interior space of the hull, where seawater perpetually collected, mixed with refuse, rotting food, dead rats, and human waste, produced a stench that contemporary accounts described, in the words of one Royal Navy surgeon, as filth so foul and stench so offensive as not to be imagined. Now picture living inside it, not visiting, living, a typical pirate vessel of the Golden Age. A brigantine, a sloop, or a converted merchant ship measured between 60 and 120 feet in length. It carried anywhere from 40 to 150 men in a space roughly equivalent to a modern two-bedroom apartment. There were no private quarters for ordinary crew. There were no beds. Men slept in hammocks, slung in the gun deck or below it in a dark, airless space where the only light came from tallow candles, and candles were forbidden near the powder magazine, which sat buried in the ship's bowels, surrounded by barrels of black gunpowder. One spark, one careless flame, and the entire ship ceased to exist in approximately the time it takes to draw breath. The rats were not occasional. They were structural. Maritime historians note that rats aboard 18th century ships were so numerous they were simply accepted as permanent passengers. They ate the food stores. They gnawed the rope lines. They died in the bilge water and added to the smell. They carried fleas that carried typhus, which maritime records show could sweep through a crew of 80 men and kill half of them within 2 weeks. And above all of this, above the rats, above the stench, above the darkness, was the sound. The constant, relentless, wood-groaning, rope-creaking, wave-hammering sound of a living ship. The ocean is never silent. And the ocean never lets you forget that you are inside something built by human hands, held together by iron bolts and wooden joints and men's desperate hope, and that the only thing standing between you and the deep water is approximately 3 inches of curved oak hull. This was home. And yet, and here is the thing historians keep returning to, the thing that refuses to make simple sense, men loved it. Chapter 4. The Hierarchy of Hell. The pirate ship had its own society, its own government, its own economy, and its own men who knew how to make it work. At the top, technically, sat the captain. But the pirate captain's authority was sharply conditional in ways that would have astonished any Royal Navy commander. According to the Articles of Agreement, the captain held absolute power in exactly one circumstance: active combat. During a battle, his word was law. His orders were instant. His decisions could not be questioned. Outside of battle, however, he was a first among equals. Persuasive rather than absolute, politically skilled rather than simply brutal. Beneath the captain sat the quartermaster, and historians argue that on most pirate ships, The quartermaster was the more important figure in daily life. He resolved disputes. He distributed plunder. He represented the crew's interests against the captain's authority and served, in effect, as both judge and trade union representative. According to maritime records, captured pirates being interrogated about their ships consistently mentioned the quartermaster first when describing who held real power aboard. Then came the men who made the ship move. The sailing master navigated. The boatswain managed the rigging, the sails, and the endless maintenance that kept a wooden ship from dissolving. The gunner maintained the cannons and the powder magazine, and was probably the most technically skilled man aboard, operating in the most explosively dangerous space on the vessel. The ship's carpenter repaired hull damage in real time, sometimes during actual battles, stuffing cloth and lead plugs into holes blasted below the waterline, while cannon fire continued above his head. And then there was the surgeon. On a Royal Navy warship, the surgeon was a trained professional. On a pirate ship, historians note, he might be a barber who had watched a surgery once, or a man who had read a pamphlet, or simply the person least afraid of blood. The tools were the same regardless of qualification: saws for amputation, needles for suture, rum for anesthesia. Maritime surgeons' accounts from the era describe performing leg amputations in under 3 minutes, not because it was skillful, but because it had to be fast before the patient died from the shock of the pain itself. There was no retirement from this life. You sailed until you died, until you were captured, or until some miracle produced enough plunder to walk away. Most men never reached the miracle. Chapter 5. Daily life between the catastrophes. Most days on a pirate ship were not battles. Most days were something harder to dramatize and harder to survive: waiting. The crew rotated through watch cycles, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, 24 hours a day, every day, regardless of weather. When you were off watch, you slept in your hammock if the sea permitted it, which it often didn't. You ate hardtack, a dense biscuit baked so hard it could crack teeth, salt pork so old and preserved in brine that it arrived at the table the color and approximate texture of wood. You drank water that had gone foul in its casks weeks ago, or rum, which was safer because the alcohol killed at least some of what would otherwise kill you. You picked lice from your hair and from your clothing, because every man aboard had lice, and there was nothing to be done about it. You repaired sails. You recoiled lines. You pumped the bilge, a job that never ended, because wooden ships leaked constantly, and the bilge pump was the only thing standing between a slow leak and a fast drowning. You watched the horizon. You watched the horizon. You watched the horizon. Historians believe that boredom was among the genuinely serious psychological dangers of pirate life. Men who had chosen this existence for its freedom and its action found themselves spending weeks at sea between encounters. When pirates finally took a prize, a merchant ship, a naval vessel caught off guard, contemporary accounts preserved in Johnson's General History describe the almost euphoric release of tension that swept through the crew. Not just greed, relief. The relief of finally having something happen, and when something happened, it happened with terrifying speed. Chapter 6. The terror of the Black Flag. Here is something the textbooks understand, but rarely explain with sufficient force. The Black Flag was not just a symbol, it was a weapon. Pirates of the Golden Age understood psychology with extraordinary sophistication. Before a single cannonball was fired, before a single boarding party swung across the gap between ships, the sight of that flag, or one of its variants, each captain designing his own, was designed to produce a specific calculation in the captain of the target vessel. Resistance means death, surrender means survival. And because pirates generally did treat surrendering vessels more humanely than resisting ones, the reputation became self-fulfilling. Blackbeard, Edward Teach, or Thatch, the most theatrically terrifying of all the Golden Age pirates, reportedly wove slow-burning cannon fuses into his enormous black beard before boarding actions, letting them smolder so that his face appeared to emerge from smoke. Whether this detail, preserved in period accounts, was literally true or partly legend remains a matter of historical debate. What is not debated is the effect. By 1717 and 1718, according to maritime records, ships in the Caribbean and along the American coast were surrendering to Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge, a former French slave ship mounting 40 guns, without firing a shot. In May of 1718, Blackbeard performed what historians call his single most audacious act. He sailed into Charleston, South Carolina, then a prosperous British colonial port, and blockaded it. Not raided it, blockaded it. No ship could enter or leave the harbor. He held the city hostage for nearly a week, seized several vessels attempting to pass, and held their passengers as hostages. His demand was not gold. His demand was not silver. According to historical records, he demanded a chest of medicine, most likely for syphilis treatment among his crew. The colonial government paid. A pirate with no nation, no army, no land had just held a British colonial city to ransom and received what he asked for. The world was paying attention. Chapter 7. The Code that Governed the Ungovernable. Every pirate ship that operated under formal Articles of Agreement, and historians believe most serious pirate operations in the Golden Age had a written code of conduct that would shock anyone who assumed pirates were simply anarchic. Criminals Roberts' articles, the most complete surviving example, specified that gambling with cards or dice was forbidden aboard ship, that lights had to be extinguished by 8 in the evening. Any man wishing to drink after that had to do it on the open deck, that any man who brought a woman aboard in disguise would face death, that every man's personal weapons had to be kept clean and functional, that desertion in battle was punishable by death or marooning, and then there was the discipline for crimes committed against each other. Stealing from a fellow crew member, even a small amount, was one of the most serious offenses on a pirate vessel. Historians note this with particular interest. Men who would think nothing of taking everything from a merchant captain considered theft from their own crew an almost sacred violation. The punishment was marooning, being put ashore on an uninhabited coastline or island with a pistol, ammunition, and enough water and food to last perhaps a day. Not theatrical, not cinematic. Simply, you are now alone, and you will probably die. And we have taken nothing from you except our company. The walking of the plank, beloved of children's stories and Hollywood productions, has no solid historical evidence behind it whatsoever. Historians who have combed period accounts, trial records, and maritime archives have found essentially no documented cases. When pirates wanted someone dead, they did not require theatrical staging. What they used instead was more straightforward: Moses' law, 39 lashes, the maximum number prescribed by biblical reference, delivered with a rope or a leather strap, usually across the bare back on the open deck, in front of the entire crew, and keel hauling, dragging a man under the hull of the ship while it moved, his body scraped across barnacles sharp enough to flay skin down to muscle, was practiced more by the Dutch Navy than by pirates, though it appeared in the broader maritime world. The distinction between pirate punishment and naval punishment, historians argue, was frequently not in the violence of the penalty, but in whether the accused had received anything resembling a fair hearing first. Pirates, remarkably, often had. Chapter 8. The Republic at the Edge of the World. By 1715, something unprecedented had happened on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas, something that no government had predicted, no admiral had planned for, and no diplomat knew quite how to address. Pirates had built a city, Nassau, New Providence's small colonial port, neglected by the British Crown. Its governor fled. its fortifications crumbling, had been quietly colonized by pirate crews who recognized its deep harbor. Its position athwart the shipping lanes and its spectacular lack of legitimate authority. Benjamin Hornigold arrived in 1714 and made it his base. Others followed. By 1717, Nassau housed somewhere between 500 and 1,000 pirates, the largest concentration of organized outlaws in the Western Hemisphere. What historians now call the Republic of Pirates. They traded with local merchants who asked no questions. They repaired ships. They drank. They argued. They fell in love. They made laws, their own laws, and enforced them with the kind of rough democratic violence that served as justice in a place that had no courts. Ships from across the Atlantic paused here, Spanish, French, Dutch, English, vessels from nations technically at war with each other, anchoring peacefully side by side in the one harbor where the black flag meant not threat, but welcome. Then, in 1715, Providence, of the genuinely spectacular variety, intervened. A Spanish treasure fleet, carrying silver and gold from the Americas, was struck by a hurricane in the Florida Straits. 11 ships went down in shallow water off the coast of Florida. The treasure lay on the ocean floor, partially visible within reach. Pirates from Nassau descended on the wrecks immediately. They pulled up fortunes and salvaged silver, and the news spread across every tavern and anchorage in the Atlantic world. Nassau was where men went rich. The British Crown could not ignore it any longer. Chapter 9. The Man Who Came to Kill the Dream. His name was Woodes Rogers, and he arrived in Nassau Harbor on July 24, 1718, with a fleet of warships and an offer that history has never quite settled how to categorize. Was it mercy? Was it a trap? Was it pragmatic statesmanship or cynical manipulation? It was a pardon, a royal pardon, signed by King George I, offering complete amnesty to any pirate who surrendered, swore an oath of loyalty to the crown, and abandoned piracy forever. Some took it. Hornigold himself took it, and Rogers eventually used him as a pirate hunter, the poetic circularity of the enforcer becoming the law that once hunted him. Others accepted the pardon and broke it almost immediately, slipping back to sea within weeks. And some refused entirely. Charles Vane sailed out of Nassau Harbor, flying his black flag directly past Rogers's warships in a final defiant gesture that remains one of the most discussed moments in pirate history. Equal parts courage and stupidity, a man choosing theater over survival. Rogers didn't negotiate with those who refused. He built gallows on the Nassau waterfront and used them. According to historical records, 8 pirates were hanged in Nassau in December 1718, their bodies left suspended long enough to deliver a message to every vessel that came to port. The Republic was over. The dream, such as it was, had been administered its final accounting, but the greatest pirates were not in Nassau. They were still at sea, and the story was not finished. Chapter 10. Blackbeard's last morning on the night of November 21st, 1718. Blackbeard's sloop Adventure lay at anchor in Ocracoke Inlet, off the North Carolina coast. His crew was drunk. They were celebrating. They had no reason to believe that 2 small Navy sloops, the Jane and the Ranger, dispatched secretly by Virginia's Governor Alexander Spotswood, were waiting on the far side of the sandbar in the dark. Lieutenant Robert Maynard had his men lie flat on the deck when the battle began. Blackbeard's cannon fire swept the open deck and found no one. Blackbeard's crew, seeing only a devastated, empty enemy vessel, believed they had won. They boarded. Maynard's men rose from below decks. What followed was described by survivors as one of the most savage close-quarters fights in the history of the American coast. Blackbeard was shot multiple times. Historical accounts record that he was shot 5 times with pistol fire and received over 20 sword wounds before he finally fell on the deck of his own ship. According to the account preserved by surgeon and historian Richard Briggs, present at the battle's aftermath, Blackbeard was still fighting when the blood loss finally finished him. Maynard hung his severed head from the bowsprit of his sloop and sailed it into port. It was brutal, it was deliberate, and it was a statement that the Crown intended everyone to read. This is what happens. This is where it ends. Every man who has ever looked at the black flag and felt anything other than fear, look again. Chapter 11. Black Bart and the Last Great Stand. If Blackbeard was the most famous pirate of the Golden Age, Bartholomew Roberts was the most successful, and his story carries a different kind of darkness. Roberts had not chosen piracy in the usual sense. He was a Welsh sailor, a navigator of genuine skill, working a legitimate merchant voyage when his ship was captured by pirates in 1719. He was offered the articles, he signed them, and within weeks, according to historical records, he was leading the crew that had captured him, the previous captain having been killed in a confrontation. Roberts was elected in his place. He took to it with a methodical, almost chilling competence. He operated across the full width of the Atlantic, the Caribbean, the American coast, the waters off Newfoundland, where he once reportedly took 22 ships in a single harbor, and the West African coast. He plundered over 400 vessels in 3 years. He dressed immaculately. He reportedly refused to allow music on Sundays. He didn't drink, an extraordinary distinction in a world where rum was consumed the way water was consumed ashore. He governed his ships with a precision and a clarity of purpose that historians have found genuinely difficult to categorize. By 1721, every naval authority in the Atlantic was looking for him. On the morning of February 10th, 1722, HMS Swallow, a 50-gun Royal Navy warship under Captain Challoner Ogle, found Roberts's ships anchored off Cape Lopez on the West African coast in present-day Gabon. Many of Roberts's men were incapacitated by drink from a prize taken the previous night. The battle that followed was swift and brutal. Roberts died early. A grape-shot wound, a cluster of small iron balls, the 18th century's equivalent of a shotgun blast, took him in the throat. He was found slumped over one of his own guns, already dead, dressed in his finest crimson damask waistcoat and hat, the way a man dresses when he knows, on some level, that today might be the last time. His crew, honoring the request he had made in advance, threw his body into the sea before the British could claim it. He was 39 years old. He had spent 3 years terrorizing 2 oceans, and when his crew surrendered shortly afterward, the trial at Cape Coast Castle, Ghana, resulted in the largest mass piracy trial in the history of the Atlantic world. 169 men prosecuted, 52 hanged. The golden age of piracy was effectively over. Chapter 12. What the ship actually was. History has spent 300 years arguing about what the pirate ship represented. Was it simply crime? Was it something more complex? Marcus Rediker, in his scholarly work, Villains of All Nations, argues that the pirate ship of the Golden Age was the first genuinely democratic workplace in the English-speaking Atlantic world, one in which poor men, many of them formerly enslaved or formerly impressed into naval service, created a system of governance, shared property, and mutual protection that the legitimate world they came from denied them entirely. The Articles of Agreement were not theater. They were a genuine constitutional arrangement, arrived at by collective negotiation and enforced by the crew against the captain, if necessary. Some historians push back on this reading, noting that pirate democracy was extremely limited. It existed primarily for the benefit of the men inside it, and was accompanied by extraordinary violence toward those outside it, including the murder and torture of captives who resisted. The pirate ship was not a utopia. It was a floating economy built on theft and enforced by terror. Both things are true at the same time. That is what makes it so difficult to look away. Economists and historians studying the Articles of Agreement have noted that several provisions, compensation for workplace injury, democratic oversight of leadership, The division of profits by share rather than by command. Anticipate labor reforms that the rest of the Western world would not legally implement until the 19th and 20th centuries. Whether pirates invented these ideas or simply improvised them out of necessity remains a matter of historical debate. What is documented is that they practiced them at sea, on ships that smelled of rot and rang with cannon fire, a century before the societies that eventually hanged them got around to writing the same principles into law. Epilogue. What they left behind. The last of the great Golden Age pirates were hanged at Execution Dock in London, their bodies suspended in iron cages above the Thames waterline until 3 tides had washed over them. The traditional maritime punishment for piracy, designed to be visible from every ship that moved in or out of the river. The Republic of Pirates in Nassau became a British colonial port, orderly and taxed. Woodes Rogers, the man who ended it, died in Nassau in 1732, nearly bankrupt, having spent his personal fortune on his governorship and received inadequate compensation from the crown he had served. The very institution that benefited most from his work left him to financial ruin. The irony was not lost on contemporary observers. The ships themselves rotted. Queen Anne's Revenge, Blackbeard's flagship, was run aground in Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina, and abandoned in 1718. It sat on the ocean floor for nearly 3 centuries. When archaeologists excavated the wreck beginning in the 1990s, they found cannons, navigational instruments, medical equipment, and the ordinary debris of shipboard life, evidence not of monsters, but of men. Men who were cold and sick and hungry and afraid and sometimes very brave and sometimes very cruel, and who chose, every single one of them, for reasons history has never fully untangled, a floating hell over the civilization that had produced them. Bartholomew Roberts' body lies somewhere in the deep water off the coast of Gabon, at the bottom of the Atlantic. No grave, no stone, no marker. Exactly as he asked, he plundered more ships than any pirate in the history of the Atlantic world. He wrote a code of laws that guaranteed his crew rights no government would offer their kind for another 100 years. He dressed magnificently and died young and asked only that the sea keep him. The sea obliged. And somewhere in the distance, in the grey space where history ends and legend begins, where the fog rolls in and the black flag climbs the mast and the world holds its breath, the ship is still sailing. It never really stopped. The golden age of piracy ended in blood and rope. But the question it asked has never been answered. What does a man owe a world that never gave him a choice? The pirates of the 18th century answered it the only way they knew how, by building their own world, however temporary, however violent, however doomed. And then they sailed it straight into history.